Before a pilot can even think about taking a new plane up into the sky, before they even get to touch the controls, they've got to fly the book first. Seriously. Every single switch, every speed limit, every emergency plan has to become pure muscle memory. So, you know what? Let's do it. Let's put ourselves in the pilot's seat and see what it really takes to master the manual for this one pretty awesome little aircraft.
So what does a pilot really need to know before flying something new? Is it just a bunch of theory? Well, not really. It's about proving, without a doubt, that you know this specific machine inside and out. And how do you prove it? You guessed it. You gotta pass a test. It's called an endorsement, and it's basically your license to fly that one particular make and model safely.
And really, it all boils down to two things. You've got the rulebook, that's the Pilot Operating Handbook, or POH for short. Think of it as the Bible for this specific airplane. Everything you need to know is in there. And then you've got the test, the endorsement questionnaire. So our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to use that rulebook to absolutely ace the test for a plane called the Aeropract A-32. Let's get into it.
All right, let's kick things off with the very first question, the absolute basics. Before we can get into the cool stuff like how fast it goes or what to do if things go sideways, we have to answer the most fundamental question there is. What exactly is this plane? Okay, pulling directly from the POH, here's our answer. The Aeropract A-32 is a two-seat high-wing monoplane with non-retractable landing gear. It's certified in the light sport airplane category, that's LSA, and it's only approved for VFR flight, which means flying by looking out the window. Simple, to the point, boom, question one done.
Okay, next up, we're diving into the numbers. And these aren't just any numbers. These are the speeds that literally keep a pilot safe in the air. A good way to think about them is like an alphabet of speed. Every single plane has its own set of V-speeds, and they basically define the safe zone, the operating envelope. And let me tell you, knowing these isn't just about passing a test. It is absolutely critical for survival.
And we have to start with the big one, the absolute king of V-speeds, VNE. That stands for never exceed speed. For this A-32, that number is 130 knots. This is the literal red line on the airspeed indicator. It's the point where the plane's structure just can't take any more. If you push it past this, well, congratulations, you've just volunteered to be a test pilot, and that's not a job you want. So, from the absolute fastest you can go, let's jump to the absolute slowest. That's VS, the stall speed. In this plane, with the flaps up, it's a shockingly low 32 knots. This is the bare minimum speed where the wings are still doing their job, creating lift. Any slower and the plane stops flying. So think about that. The entire world of safe flight for this aircraft lives between 130 knots and just 32 knots. This table here really connects the dots between those two extremes, right? We've got our top end, VNE, at 130, and the bottom end, VS, at 32. But what's in the middle? Well, you've got VA, maneuvering speed, at 81 knots. The rule here is simple. Don't yank the controls around above this speed. Then there's VY at 65 knots. That's your best rate of climb, the quickest way to gain altitude. And right below it, VX at 54 knots, your best angle of climb. That's the one you use to get up and over a big obstacle, like some trees at the end of the runway. Oh, and that last one is super important. Vmax X/W. That's your max demonstrated crosswind. For this plane, it's 14 knots. Good to know. Now, the test questionnaire tries to get you with this next one. It asks about landing gear speeds, things like VLE and VLO. And this is a classic gotcha question, right? It's there to see if you're actually paying attention. Because if you remember from the very beginning, the A-32 has fixed gear. The wheels don't go up or down. So those speeds, totally not applicable. Nice try, test. Safety isn't just about how fast you're going. It's also about the stress you're putting on the plane itself. We're talking about G-forces, and the POH is crystal clear on this. The A-32 can handle up to +4 Gs. That's 4 times the normal force of gravity pulling you into your seat. And on the flip side, it can take -2 Gs, pushing you up against your straps. Now, that's with the flaps up. The second you put the flaps down, that limit drops to just +2 Gs. If you go past these numbers, you're literally gambling with the airplane's structure. Okay, we've gone over the basics, the normal everyday limits. But now we get to the most critical part of this entire test. This is without a doubt the most important knowledge a pilot can have. Because what we're about to cover, this is where memorizing the book is the difference between coming home to tell the story and having someone else write an accident report about you.
So picture this. You're in the cockpit, you turn the key, and suddenly, fire. An engine fire on the ground. You have zero time to grab the checklist. Zero. This has to be pure automatic muscle memory. What do? 1. Throttle to idle. 2. Ignition off. 3. Fuel valves closed. 4. Get out of the cockpit. Just 4 simple steps, executed without a single thought. That's what saves your life.
Okay, now for what might be the single most feared emergency in flying. The engine quits right after you've taken off. You're low, you're slow, and every fiber of your being is screaming at you to turn back to the runway behind you. But the manual, the training, everything screams louder. Do not turn back. It's called the impossible turn for a reason. You will not make it. The procedure is brutally simple and non-negotiable. You keep the nose down, get to your best glide speed, and you find a place to land straight ahead. Period.
And that brings us to this number. 59 knots. If you remember nothing else from the emergency section, remember this. 59 knots is the magic number if the engine goes quiet. It's the optimum glide speed. What does that mean? It means at this exact speed, you travel the farthest forward for every foot of altitude you're losing. It's the speed that buys you precious seconds, and those seconds buy you options for where to land.
So what if the engine fails when you're up high, in the cruise? Well, the good news is you've got more altitude, which means more time. But the process, the discipline is exactly the same. The pilot's mantra kicks in. Aviate, navigate, communicate. First, aviate. Fly the airplane. Get to that magic 59 knots. Second, navigate. Pick a spot on the ground to land. Third, communicate. Get on the radio and tell someone you're in trouble. Only after all that do you start thinking about the landing itself, like putting down flaps to touch down as slowly as possible. It's about staying calm and following the steps, even when everything is going wrong. And just to really hammer home the point about safety and knowing the plane's limits, the POH has this little gem inside, and I quote, "Any aerobatics, including intentional spinning, is prohibited." Yeah, no ambiguity there, right? This is not a suggestion, it's a hard rule. This is a light sport aircraft, it's not built for loops and rolls. And that's a huge lesson for any pilot. Knowing what you can't do is just as critical as knowing what you can. Okay, so we've just been through the scary stuff, the high-stakes world of emergencies. Let's take a breath and shift gears. We're going to talk about the foundation of every single safe flight, the normal, everyday procedures. This is the stuff that pilots do 99.9% of the time, the meticulous, disciplined work that makes flying so safe. You see, every flight has a certain rhythm, a predictable flow designed so that absolutely nothing gets missed. It starts on the ground, way before the engine even turns over, with a pre-flight check, and it carries all the way through engine start, taxi, takeoff, climb, cruise, and finally the approach and landing. It's about knowing the exact power setting for your climb, or how to lean the engine just right in cruise to get the most out of your fuel. It's precision from start to finish. And just to give you an idea of how detailed this gets, the test actually asks you to know the difference between starting a cold engine versus a hot one. And there is a difference. For a cold start, you're going to use the choke lever to get a richer fuel mixture going. But if the engine's already warm, you don't touch the choke at all. It might seem like a tiny little detail, but it's one of those things you just have to know. No excuses. The pre-flight checklist in the manual is, not going to lie, pretty long. But it's long for a very good reason. And a few things are so important they're worth calling out. You always check your flight controls for free and full movement. You always drain a little fuel from the tanks to check for gunk or water. And then there's the classic pilot mistake, forgetting to take the cover off the pitot probe. That's the little tube that measures your airspeed. If you forget that, you're taken off blind, and that has led to disaster more than you'd think. Here's another one of those super specific questions from the test. Before you take off, you always do an engine run-up on the ground to make sure everything's running right. The POH for the A-32 says you need to check the ignition system at exactly 4,000 RPM. Not around 4,000, not 3,900, 4,000. That's the kind of precision we're talking about here. It's about following the book to the letter. So when you step back and look at all of this, the V speeds, the G limits, the emergency checklists, the step-by-step normal procedures, it all paints one very clear picture. It all leads to one fundamental truth about being a pilot. Knowledge isn't just power, it's survival. And if you still have any doubt about how important this all is, well, this quote is on the very first page of the POH. This airplane is to be operated in compliance with information and limitations contained herein. That's not a friendly suggestion. That is a direct order.
The manual isn't a collection of tips, it's the law for this aircraft, and you break it at your own peril.
You know, today we've barely even scratched the surface of what it takes to truly master just one airplane, this little Aeropract A-32. Now think about it. Every single aircraft out there, from the smallest two-seater to the biggest jumbo jet, has its own version of this rule book, its own Bible of procedures and limits. It really makes you appreciate the incredible knowledge and discipline that's at the very heart of aviation. And it leaves you wondering, what would it take to master them all?